Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me. Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me. While I'm on this tedious journey, I want you, Lord, to walk with me. Walk with me. Walk with me. Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me. While I'm on this tedious journey, I want you, Lord, to walk with me. Walk with me. Walk with me. While I'm on this tedious journey, I want you, Lord, to walk with me.
Hi, BEH families, students, and staff. How are you? This is Mama Malaika, pre-K teacher for BEH. And I want to bring an introduction into what we're about to do, the I Have a Dream speech. But first, I want to tell you a story. The story is about why we need to know our history. There was a little boy, let's call him Jamal, who had a brand new 10-speed bike, and he loved riding his bike. And one day he was just riding his bike, and he rode his bike on a street that had a big hole in it. The sidewalk had cracked and crumbled, and it was a mess. And Jamal rode his bike over this crack, and he had a crash, and he broke his leg. Oh, for 6 weeks, Jamal could not ride his bike, and he was so unhappy. But as soon as his leg was fixed, was back to normal, he got on his bike and started to ride because he loved riding his bike. He rode his bike. But he came upon the same street, and he went over the same cracks and had a crash and broke his leg again in the same place. Oh, he was so disappointed. Here he is again, breaking his leg. Same place, same time of the day. He wasn't paying attention. After 6 more weeks of his leg getting healed, he got on his bike again and started riding. And he just riding. And then he came to that same street. He stopped. He remembered his history. He remembered that he had broken his leg twice on that street in that same area. And he said, nope, I'm not going down that street. I learned from my history. And that's how he kept writing and was able to go on. History is that way. If you learn from your history, then you won't make the same mistakes. The speech that we're about to do for you is a speech that Dr. Martin Luther King did in 1963. At that time, I was 14, and I was planning to go to Washington, D.C., with my church, whose NAACP youth group was going. And I had saved my money all the summer so that I can go, but I wasn't allowed to go. My father said, no, it's going to be dangerous. I don't want you to go because I don't want you to get hurt. So I didn't go. And I was so sorry that had happened, that I was not allowed to go to Washington, D.C. to see Dr. Martin Luther King. I learned later in my life that the reason my dad didn't want me to go is because of his great uncle who was killed by the Ku Klux Klan for voting. And he was afraid something like that would come because of all the Black people and people of color and white people who were going to the March on Washington. But he was afraid that something would happen to me. So I didn't get to go. Now, in this speech about Martin Luther King wrote of I Have a Dream, it was in 1963. And at that time, Black people were called Negroes and colored people. So in his speech, he will say, it is said, Negroes and colored people. And that was just the term that was used back then. Now we use today, Black people or African American people. So that's the difference. Back then it was colored or Negro. Now it's Black or African American. Well, I hope this will help you as we go on and do I Have a Dream speech. I hope you enjoy it. Take care. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
I have a dream.
I have a dream.
I have a dream. I have a dream.
I'm happy to join you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in history of our nation.
4 years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon light of hope to millions of Negro soldiers who had just been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity.
But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, the Negro is still languished in the corners of American society and finds himself an exile in his own land.
Come here today to dramatize a shameful condition.
In a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cash a check when the architects of our republic wrote, in the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men, yes, Black men, as well as white men, will be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned.
Instead of honoring the sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check. A check which has come back marked insufficient funds.
But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there is insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity of this nation. And so we've become to cash this a check that will give us upon demand the riches of freedom and the security of justice.
We have also come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children.
It would be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of the moment. The sweltering summer of the nation's legitimate discontent will not pass until there is an invigorating autumn of freedom and equality. 1963 is not an end, but a beginning. And those who hoped that the nation needed to blow off steam will now be content, will have a rude awakening if the nation returns to business as usual.
And there will be neither rest nor tranquility in America until the Negro is granted his citizens' rights.
Whirlwinds of revolt will continue to shake the foundation of our nation until the bright day of justice emerges.
But there is something that I must say to my people, who stand in the warm threshold which leads into the palace of justice. In process of gaining our rightful place, we must not be guilty of our wrongful deeds.
Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. We must forever conduct our struggle on the high plane of dignity and discipline.
We must not allow our creative protests to degenerate into physical violence. Again and again, we must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force.
The marvelous new militancy which has engulfed the Negro community must not lead us to a distrust of all white people. For many of our white brothers, as evidenced by their presence here today, have come to realize that their destiny is tied up with our destiny. And they have come to realize that their freedom is inextricably bound to our freedom.
We cannot walk alone. And as we walk, we must make the pledge that we shall always march ahead. We cannot turn back.
There are those who are asking the devotees of civil rights, when will you be satisfied?
We can never be satisfied as long as a Negro is the victim of unspeakable horrors of police brutality. We can never be satisfied as long as our bodies, heavy with the fatigue of travel, cannot gain lodging in the motels of the highways and the hotels of the cities. We cannot be satisfied as long as the Negro's basic mobility is from a smaller ghetto to a larger one.
We can never be satisfied as long as our children are stripped of their selfhood and robbed of their dignity by signs stating for whites only. We cannot be satisfied as long as a Negro in Mississippi cannot vote and a Negro in New York believes he has nothing for which to vote.
No, we're not satisfied. We will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters in righteousness like a mighty stream.
I am not unmindful that some of you have come here out of great trials and tribulations. Some of you have come fresh from narrow jail cells, and some of you have come from areas where your quest for freedom left you battered by the storms of persecution and staggered by the winds of police brutality. You have been the veterans of creative suffering. Continue to work with the faith that unearned suffering is redemptive.
Go back to Mississippi, go back to Alabama, go back to South Carolina, go back to Georgia, go back to Louisiana. Go back to the slums and ghettos of our northern cities, knowing that somehow this situation can and will be changed.
Let us not wallow in the valley of despair. I say to you today, my friends, and so even though we face the difficulties, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream.
I have a dream.
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal.
I have a dream. I have a dream.
I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood.
I have a
dream.
That one day, even the state of Mississippi, a state smeltering with the heat of injustice, smeltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice.
That my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
That one day down in Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification. One day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers.
I have a dream today.
I have a dream.
I have a dream.
I have a dream.
That one day every valley shall be exalted, and every hill and mountain shall be made low. The rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together.
This is our hope in the faith that I'll go back to the South with.
With this faith, we will be able to hew out of this mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, and to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day.
And this will be the day when all of God's children will be able to sing with new meaning.
My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of my pilgrim's pride, from every mountainside, let freedom ring.
And if America is to be a great nation, this must become true.
And so let freedom ring from the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire.
Let freedom ring from the mighty mountains of New York.
Let freedom ring from the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania.
Let freedom ring from the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado.
Let freedom ring from the curvaceous slopes of California.
Not only that,
let freedom ring from the Stone Mountain of Georgia.
Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee.
Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill from Mississippi.
From every mountainside, let freedom ring.
And when this happens, and when we allow freedom ring, when we let it ring from every village and hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual.
Free at last! Free at last! Oh God Almighty! Free at last! We're free!
I got peace.
I don't have any.
I got peace. Like a river in my soul. I got peace. Like a river, I got peace.
It's like a river.
I
got peace like a river in my soul.